So, good afternoon. When I got the job, to do the introduction, speaking to the background, this is one of my pieces of cake. Because what is better? We have a classification talk, it's what we love, we like to know about people. And so easy peasy, they don't tell me anything, right? My job is done. Well, it was not quite so easy because I did ask for Richard's CV. And that was eye-opening. Because all of a sudden I realized I actually have a job to do. And the job that I have to do is actually very important because it really, I have to tell you about a little bit about his illustrious career and all the accomplishments because I know Richard. He won't do that. So that's my job. So I'll just go through it very quickly because after I got this, I could actually pretty much occupy your time. So not only did he receive an unbelievably complete and complex education, but he also did something that we know he does. He volunteers. And he volunteered pretty much everywhere along the line throughout his career. And I just want to read a couple of these. So he got his education in pediatrics and in pediatric critical care. And during all this time, he joined committees that we all know make the organization run better, they're tedious and time consuming. And he joined a whole bunch of them. What else really floored me, he is active in his church community with the Sons of Abraham. And he is an international guy. Did you guys know that he actually interpreter for Spanish-speaking patients at Gunderson? Easy for him, speaks Spanish perfectly. Then to top it all off, he had time for publishing. So my question actually was to his wife, when does he sleep? Good. Thank you, because I couldn't figure this out, because not only is an accomplished speaker, he gave talks all over the world, but he's also an accomplished publisher. And so then I got to almost awards, and at that point I gave up because he has about 2 pages of awards. And if I start reading those, we might as well put the raffle tickets because it'll take forever. So it really is a privilege to introduce an esteemed colleague of mine. And without further ado, Richard. Get up here.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Thomas, and thank you all for being here. And thank you especially for talking about somebody else, because I don't have any idea that who you were talking about there. Not me. But I've been a member of this club for 20 years, and I thought it was about time that I gave my classification talk. So here goes. It's going to fit into the Rotary standards. It will be the truth. It ought to be fair to all concerned. I hope it will build goodwill and better friendship. And I hope when I am done that this has been beneficial to me, because we will see. We'll see what happens. Let's see. How do I advance this, Rob?
Just hit the 0 key.
0 key. Okay. Okay. This is my family, my 2 families. On the left, it's the Glickson family. That's my mother right here. Sitting between her parents and her grandparents on the right. On the other side, the Strauss family, my father, Fred Strauss, and his mother, Hannah. My mother is a Chicagoan. My father was a New Yorker. They did what a lot of people, I think, of that age did. They were children. They grew up. They went to school. My mother went to the University of Chicago, my father to New York University. And then the war came and they enlisted in the military. My mother was a WAVE, women accepted for volunteer, emergency volunteer action in the Navy. My dad was in the Army. And then they went back to Chicago after the war was done. And again, like most people, they figured out, what am I going to do? Get a job, socialize, meet people. Well, they socialized, they met, and they were married at the Shoreham Hotel in Chicago in 1947. And then what happened? Well, it happened to a lot of people. They had a family. My brother Harvey appeared in 1949, born at Michael Reese Hospital on the south side of Chicago. And then 2 years later, I appeared. And aren't we a cute family? My mom, my older brother, and I are there. We lived on the south side of Chicago, 72nd Street and Jeffrey, by the Illinois Central tracks, the railroad tracks. And my brother and I just loved the railroad. So we had these costume these outfits, which we wore all the time. And we went over to the train and we watched the things going up and down. And kind of ironically or appropriately, what did my parents do? Well, my father found a job. He was a manager of a floor covering company, and he found a job in Syracuse, New York. So they took the train eastward and they went along what would become Interstate 90. And we moved to Syracuse, New York. That was, I couldn't believe it, but it's 69 years ago that we moved there. Life in Syracuse, well, it was complicated a little bit by the fact that our little brother was born, Robert, a great little kid, but he took all of our toys and sort of messed up our childhood, but he too was cute. Our lives were relatively normal, or so we thought. After all, we were kids, we went to school, we messed around, we did things that children do. And life was normal until March 15th of 1959, when Fred, my father, died. This was a Sunday morning. Sunday morning for us was sort of not the greatest time because we had to go to Sunday school again. Every Sunday we had to go. But this day, our parents were responsible for driving. And what that usually meant was if we were good, we would stop at Snowflake Bakery to get bagels. We would go to Govinda's Delicatessen. We would get like a 56-pound of lox because it was so expensive. And then we'd go home. That day, my father drove us. We got home. He didn't feel so good. He went upstairs, and the next thing we knew, we were in the den watching a movie. We could hear him crying out, saying, Betty, my chest hurts. I can't breathe. My mother called an ambulance, this big old Eastern ambulance, those big Cadillac, orange and blue, pulled up backwards at our house. My mom went out. My father went out on the stretcher. My mother came back in about an hour and a half. We're still watching the movie, and she walked in and she said, boys, your father's not coming home anymore. And that's how we learned that Fred, at age 46, died of a heart attack. My mom was 40 years old, and we were 10. I was almost 8, and Robert he had just turned 3. So we really didn't have to recreate our lives because we were children. But my mother really did recreate her life. And she enrolled in a master's program in library science at Syracuse University. She endured what I consider to be a long line of really annoying men who pursued her. I don't know why well, I know why they pursued her, but they're pursuing somebody who had 3 annoying little boys. And so, but she kind of rebuffed them. But 3 years later, she married Henry Levinstein, who was a professor of physics at Syracuse University. And ironically, Henry was probably Fred's, my biologic father, was Fred's best friend. When my parents left Chicago, they were told, when you get to Syracuse, look up the Levinsteins, Henry and his mother, Nanette, and you will like them. He was a terrific person, really a brilliant scientist, wonderful guy, just a happy nature and a very positive person. So for us, this was a great thing. My pre-high school life, well, what was that all about? Well, it was school, it was friends, it was the Jewish Community Center, it was sports, it was YMCA Camp Towsey. I put this on here, this little thing at the bottom. It's a yellow kind of a roster sheet when I was at the center, the Jewish Community Center on Biddy basketball. I was a little kid. I was 11 years old. I was 4 feet 7 inches tall. I weighed 75 pounds. You can see up there on the second from the right, you can see I have a button-down collar there, chino pants. I really haven't changed a whole lot. I still have these button-down shirts. My mother thought I was cute. So I think I looked pretty cute then too. If you look to the right, that's my 6th grade class, Mr. Boynton. He was the first male teacher we ever had. And at least back in that era, that was something really special. Very artistic guy. He wrote a play, probably haven't seen it, Space Age Santa. So here we are, Space Age Santa, the 8 stars of Space Age Santa. And except for the girl second from the left, everybody else in this play is Jewish, which is kind of interesting for Space Age Santa. The other play that we put on in Mr. Boynton's class was an Easter play, and it was the same 7 of 8 kids. I don't have a picture of that, but I was Reginald Rabbit in that play. So pretty interesting. My high school life, well, it was pretty much the same. It was friends, it was sports. It was the center of the JCC. I was little. I got to high school, this baseball photo, this is the varsity baseball team at Nottingham High School. When I was in 10th grade, I was 4 feet 9 inches and 90 pounds. That is really small. The guy at the top, the tallest guy, this is Chris Capanis, first baseman, 6 feet 6 inches tall. So I was like this little ant to these guys. I was a second baseman. What does that mean? It means I never played. I sat on the bench and I was annoying to these 6'6" people. I was on the gymnastics team, not very good. Again, I was small, but I was determined. And in that photo, I think I'm determined to show that I do have biceps. You see these other guys and they have biceps and they have pecs. And I am just pushing to make something appear there so that it looks like I might have muscles. My friends in high school, what do we do? Well, most of my friends were Jewish, some weren't. I played cards a lot. We played cards every weekend. Played cards, smoked cigars and cigarettes, drank beer. I didn't like beer, but it made me fit in with my friends. These are my same friends there. Most of the time, why were we playing cards? Well, because we couldn't get dates, because we didn't know how to fraternize with girls. I didn't know how to talk to girls, but we dreamt a lot about girls as we played cards. This is where I could really get in trouble, but toward the end of high school, my senior year, the end of February, I'm walking down the hall, and up ahead on the left are these two girls, one of whom is this girl, Martha Gabriel. She's just like the cutest, funniest, smartest girl in our class, but she didn't know me from a hole in the wall. And I used to think, if only she knew who I was, wouldn't that be great? I would just make my life perfect. So I'm walking down the hall, she's over there, and as I walk past her, these words come out of her mouth. She says, "Hi there, Rich." And I just about died because she knew my name. So that was terrific. We ended up being boyfriend and girlfriend for several months. We went to senior prom. You can see how thrilled she looked to be there. We graduated high school, and because I thought this was the love of my life and we would spend the rest of our lives together, about 20 minutes after graduation, she broke up with me. And so I was just heartbroken. And I said, part of my heartbrokenness said, why? She said, well, I've decided to go out with somebody else. And who is this somebody else? Well, Donnie Cicerelli. Now, I don't know if you know Donnie Cicerelli, but Donnie Cicerelli, he failed 2 years of high school. I wore button-down shirts. Donnie wore a t-shirt that was torn, had grease on it. He drove this hot rod. He smoked. He had his cigarettes, here, and he had his lighter here. And I just couldn't believe that she dumped me for him. But I'm getting over that. Part of my life, I would say, has been sort of ruled by what you might call this thoughtful, purposeful indecision. I knew I was going to college. I'd been accepted at Northwestern University, at the University of Michigan. Didn't know which place I wanted to go to, but I loved working at the New York State Fair. And the New York State Fair finishes Labor Day. And the University of Michigan starts before Labor Day. And Northwestern starts at the end of September. So I wanted to continue selling Matchbox toys, guessing people's weight and age at the New York State Fair. So I ended up going to Northwestern University. This is in Evanston, Illinois, beautiful suburb of Chicago. It's the home of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. I don't know how many people know that, but that meant that there was no alcohol in Evanston. And it's not that I really liked alcohol, but it made a real difference, I think, in the atmosphere of the place. The other thing was that in Chicago, my grandmother lived there, my uncle, my aunts, my cousins. So that was terrific. I was at Northwestern for 4 years. Boys were at the north end of campus. The girls were at the south end of campus. You know my successful dating history already. So how did I do socially at Northwestern? I got a cat. And that's really how I socialized. So I had Ozzy the cat. What about life in Evanston after Northwestern? Well, you know, I had a biology degree from Northwestern. I thought that this would take me places, but I really didn't. I was very naive. What did I do? I worked in a bookstore. I was fired from that bookstore for being insubordinate to my boss, who was about 10 days older than I was. I drove a cab for 2 companies. I really liked that. I worked for the US Postal Service in Winnetka, Illinois. And then I finally got a job at a hospital. I applied at hospitals because I thought, I'm interested in medicine. I'm interested in science. I've got this degree. And pretty much people said to me, yeah, you have a degree from this great university, but you know what you can do? You can't do anything. You are not qualified to do anything. But Augustana Hospital, to their credit, offered me a job as the assistant clerk in the lab room storeroom, the laboratory storeroom. So that's where I started. This did heighten my interest in medicine and science. What did I do? I began shadowing medical technologists in the lab. I began spending time in the library reading. I would accompany people on rounds. I learned how to draw blood. That led to working in the lab itself. I don't think this could ever happen nowadays, but it happened then. I sort of worked my way into a job. I realized I was interested in medicine. I applied to medical schools, but because I hadn't applied myself in college, most places said to me, well, why would we take you when we have far more qualified candidates? So I wasn't accepted. So I applied to the Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara, and I went there. But when I was at Augustana Hospital, it also kindled my interest in the blood bank. And who worked in the blood bank but my last girlfriend and my first and only spouse, Pam. We had a court, what does it say there? Oh my God. Pursued me for 3 years. That's not exactly true. But I will tell you what is true, that I thought about asking her out for a while, but I was so shy. So I didn't. So she actually, I think this is true. She called me up and she asked me out to breakfast for our first date. So much to her credit. But we had a courtship of 3 years. Actually, I think that middle picture, I think she's saying to me, you know, you've got this collar without button downs. Why are you wearing this shirt? But we had a courtship of 3 years, which led to a very important day, December 19th, 1976. These are a couple of other things that were happening that day. But December 19th, 1976, I can tell you, was probably the happiest day of my parents' lives. Because my parents, I think they figured I would never find somebody who would put up with me, settle down with me, but they were wrong. And this is our wedding day. And I think we look a little bit happier than my girlfriend from senior prom, but we do look pretty serious. It doesn't look there like this is going to last 46 years. We were married at Bond Chapel at University of Chicago, a beautiful day in the middle of December, which was kind of crazy. But we had to get back to Mexico because school started in about 10 days. So we packed our apartment, we packed our 4 cats, we put them in the car, we put everything on the car, and we set off to Guadalajara. And this is really what we looked like. 2,500 miles. We got 5 miles away on Lakeshore Drive, wind blowing, snowstorm. Everything on top of the car blew off. We put everything in the car and set off, and now we only have 2,045 miles to go. Life in Guadalajara was really highlighted by the birth of our first child, Jennifer, adorable girl. And I went to the UAG, and my aim there at that university was, I'm going to get out of here in 2 years, the earliest time that somebody can transfer. And so I really applied myself. I was a good student. We had an enormous class. We had 1,500 people in this class, and I was the top student in our class, and I got this award. And after 2 years, I was lucky enough to get out. We had more thoughtful and I suppose more indecision. Where should we go? I was accepted a number of places, and we decided we had been to Chicago. We had lived in Chicago a long time. We weren't that interested in going someplace we didn't know, like Omaha. So we decided that we would go to New York City. Moved there, went to New York University School of Medicine. I was there for 4 years. We lived in Queens. And this picture on the right, that's a part of our class. We graduated at Washington Square Park. I'm reminded of NYU because we had classes about this size. And so when I was in my third or fourth year of medical school, somebody would be speaking up here and come up with a question and say, so what is the number one reason for the blah, blah, blah? And then we'd go, Strauss. And it was always me. I was always picked. And I think it was because I was this transfer student and I had to make my bones, I suppose. So this was followed by a decision. I went to pediatric residency. I decided in medical school, I loved pediatrics. I really didn't like internal medicine. I didn't like taking care of adults. So pediatrics would be great, except of course you have to deal with adults because children have parents who are adults. Our department chair, a man named Frank Oski, really a brilliant academician, he wrote this book, Don't Drink Your Milk. By that, he meant don't drink a cow's milk. Don't drink cow milk or goat milk. Those are meant for cows and goats. They're not meant for humans. Big proponent of human milk. This is my first class here. And if you'll see behind Dr. Oski, I don't know if you can recognize the guy standing behind Dr. Oski, but it's none other than our own Jeffrey Thompson. And Jeff was a fellow resident. He's younger than I am, but he was ahead of me because, I missed those 4 years. So he was one of my senior residents, and we spent several years together in Syracuse, and that was a terrific experience. While we were there, Pam worked in a medical laboratory. I was on call every third to fourth night, holidays, weekends. That's really where I learned how to be a pediatrician. I learned from these wonderful nurses. I learned from my fellow residents, from my mentors who were the professors, and learned from the children and the parents who were unfortunate enough to be in the hospital and to be patients of ours. Interesting, I don't know if is Marv Davis here today? Marv is not. I thought he would be here, but Syracuse, I grew up there and then I went back there. You hear these things, you might be from such a place, but you might be from Syracuse if you know who this is, and Marv would know who that is. That's Ernie Davis, who is a Heisman Trophy winner from Syracuse University. You might know what this thing is. I'm sure all of your feet have been in that. That's the Brannick device. That's from Syracuse, New York. And you might be from Syracuse if you, when you go into a restaurant, you flip the plate over to see if it's Syracuse China. You flip the plate over here, it's not. But at the Radisson Center, it is. It's from Syracuse. Life in Syracuse. Am I doing okay for time? 5 minutes. Okay. Peter was born 1981, 5 weeks early. The brawny little kid, adorable, but he was pretty small, 5 feet. Yeah, 5 pounds, 5 ounces. And life in Syracuse, it was really very nice. We were back in town with my parents. My brothers didn't live that far away. Unfortunately, my dad had a very severe heart attack at the end of March of 1984, and he really never recovered from that. But it was good that we were there with my parents. My residency was completed. I needed a job. So what did we do? We moved farther east on I-90. We went to Albany, New York. We went to Albany Medical College, where I was a general academic pediatrician and Pam worked in the lab. We really liked Albany. It's close to a lot of places, a small, medium capital city near the Adirondacks, near the Catskills, near New York City. But my dad became sicker and sicker. And then we had to decide, we didn't really like it there. I wanted to do something else. So I applied and I was accepted to a pediatric critical care fellowship at the University of Minnesota. But I later heard that there was an opening in such a program in Madison. And Minnesota was a very, very technically different, just kind of over technologized program, I thought. So I got out of that and I went to Madison. We moved to Madison in June of 1986. And the day we arrived, my dad died in Syracuse. So a very inauspicious start and a terrible way to start our lives there. My dad, as I told you, he was really a great guy. I consider him my father. He was a real scientist. He was, and I think Nancy Mueller, you're a scientist, you're a nuclear physicist, right? My dad was a solid state infrared physicist. So he did things like heat detectors for the Air Force, for all these major companies. But he also recognized that not everybody wanted to go into physics, that people had to take science courses. And so he developed something called the physics of toys, because everything is really based in physics, design, everything. So this was toys, things that nobody would want. He'd go to flea markets and find things, and he would show people the physics of everyday things. Life in Madison, I did a 2-year fellowship in critical care medicine. Callie was born there in 1987. And then another decision came. That fellowship was 2 years. We wanted to stay. Everybody wants to stay in Madison, but there wasn't a position. So we had to decide what to do. Do we go back to Syracuse? Do we go to La Crosse, Wisconsin? Do we go to Kansas City? I knew Jeff was here. Jeff told me that we could create a position here that would satisfy the department and satisfy the things that I wanted to do. So we moved here in 1988. I worked at Gunderson. Pam has worked for the circuit court with our own Judge Scott Horn. Our 3 kids, they went to State Road School, Lincoln Middle School, Central High School. We have 3 children. They submitted 4 college applications. Jennifer submitted 2, and she went to Madison. And Peter and Hallie, they submitted 1. They went to Madison because they saw what Jennifer's experience was like. I hope it was that she got a good education, not that it was just a great place to be and a lot of fun. We had a pretty slow start here for the first 6 months or so. Not a whole lot of friends beyond Sandy and Jeff. And we wondered if we would stay here, but suddenly we've been here 34 years. It's hard to believe. So I worked at Gunderson for my career, the Department of Pediatrics in the pediatric ICU, the neonatal ICU, the sedation service, pediatric clinic, and I was department chair for 12 wonderful, fulfilling, satisfying years. I don't know who put that up there, excruciating years, but, and then I also worked for Global Partners Nicaragua with Sheila and others. Medical interpreter, I got toward the end of my career and, people kept saying to me, are you retired yet? Or are you still working? Which gave me the feeling that you look so old, you are so decrepit. They couldn't allow you to work here, right? And one day I saw an ad in the paper and Maribel Bird had something in the paper. It was, would you like to be a medical interpreter? Take this test. I took the test, I passed it. I did night work at Viterbo, then I took a written exam and an oral exam, and now I am a certified medical interpreter, and I work once in a while at Gunderson, and I volunteer at St. Clair. We've also been involved with Global Partners Nicaragua, and then the Lao Friends Hospital for Children in Luang Prabang, Laos. Our little children, they're now grown-up children. They have children of their own. Jennifer, she grew up to be, and here she is as a little kid and as a bigger kid. She grew up to be a cantor at a synagogue in St. Paul, Minnesota. She and Nick is a Feldenkrais practitioner, and they have 4 children, Henry, Ari, Zelda, and Eve. And the photo on the right is to show that they have 8 blue eyes. Peter, this scrawny little 5-pound, 5-ounce person, he is now still pretty thin, but he's about 6 feet tall, chiropractor at Gunderson. He lives on Alaska with Noelle, and Noelle is a life and mindset coach, and their lovely children, Weber, who's now 8, and Willa, who is 7 as a couple of days ago. Here they are. And then Hallie, she was a Rebecca for about the first 9 months of her life, and we realized she's really not a Rebecca. So we went with her middle name, Hallie, and Hallie lives in Washington, where she is a psychologist, and her husband, Zach, is a healthcare policy analyst for Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Marnie, who is just about 5, and Rivers, who is 20 months and just adorable kids. Of course, I've been influenced, my life has been influenced greatly by Pam, by our 3 children, by our 8 grandchildren, by my mother, I think much less so by my biologic father, and some by my stepdad, Henry. But my mom came here for the last 2 years of her life when she was declining in her health. And these are just some things that she said to me as during my life. She lived at Eagle Crest. She said, she would look at me kind of wistfully at times, say, I'm so glad you got on the train. And this refers to when she was recently widowed the first time. We went to New York to see my grandmother, going back to Syracuse on the train, Grand Central Station, the train is boarding. There's Harvey, there's Robert, and I'm not there. So I'm not on the platform. She can't see me. Train is leaving, doesn't know what to do. She got on the train. She didn't know I got on the train too. And she found me, and my mother was so upset. My mother was so happy. My mother was so angry. So the rest of her life, she would sometimes look at me and she'd say, I'm so glad you got on the train. She also is fond of saying, somebody's going to end up crying. It's not going to be me. And I hear my children saying that as well. She also said, she would say to me when I did something wrong, thank God you're cute. I'm sure you have said that to your children many times. And my mother would say a lot of times, I love you dearly. And there was clearly a comma and the word but after that. So as in, I love you dearly, but if you don't wash that sweater or have it dry cleaned, you will never have a date because it doesn't smell good. And then probably the most important thing, we would ask her what she wants for birthdays, anniversaries, Hanukkah, whatever. And we would hope she would say, flowers, a dress, earrings, something like that. But she said, I just want you boys to be friends when you grow up. That's probably the most difficult thing, to be friends sometimes with siblings. But she would be happy that the three of us are friends and we have traveled and we speak to each other, which is a good thing. Rotary Club of La Crosse, been a member for 20 years, thanks to Mike Hardigan, who encouraged me and sponsored me to join. I thought for about the first 10 years I would be kicked out because my attendance was like 40%, 50%. It was always under the threshold and nobody did kick me out. So that was a good thing. It took me several years to understand what it meant to be a Rotarian, how to enjoy it. And I really do enjoy it now. I find that Thursdays, one of my favorite times of the week. It's inspirational, it's uplifting, and I enjoy being with all of you and having met all of you. So that's been a wonderful experience. Other interests, skiing, running, racquetball. I'm not good at any of these things. I love music. I love musical instruments. I'm not good at that either. We belong to a book group. We travel, we camp. We belong to Congregation Sons of Abraham. And those are all things that I like to do. My life partner, well, I think, gosh, we've been married for 46 years. It's, how did I put up with 46 years of Pam's personality and her quirks and things like that? It's not been a problem. She has just been thoroughly wonderful. But how did she put up with me for 46 years? That's the question. She's nodding her head for that. And so that's pretty remarkable that she has been able to do that. And I'm thankful for that. And I dedicate all of this to you. Am I okay for time or am I over?
You want to do your thing?
I thought I would do that.
We got no time for
I
questions.
have a performance here. And this is in honor of my lovely wife. And what I'll tell you is that this song, you'll know this song, but this song is prompted by just thinking, how did I feel about her when I saw her in the blood bank and she called me up for a date. So thankfully she called me up for a date. So I'll bring this over. It's a short song. You'll know the refrain, so please just join that. Okay. About your day and night, it's only right to think about your brain and what you're trying. Don't have these together. I would call me up in the time, and you say you love me. And in my mind, imagine how the world would be. So there's fun. Be together. The only one for me and you for me.
Well, Richard